Good evening and welcome once again to another episode of the Fantasy Wildcard Devy Show. My name is Jack and I'm joined as ever by my beautiful co-host Phil. How are you doing?
Yeah, man, what's not to love? All right, college football is rocking. Things are absolutely. Well, I mean, we've got so much to talk about. Like, how can you believe it's only been a fortnight since we last went through the kind of mad updates of like the kind of Devy world and the college football world? And then I've been at a kid's birthday party tonight, so I'm jelly and ice creamed up. I've plaster parceled. I'm good to go, mate. Let's do it.
You're ready to Candy Crush this episode. That's what you're telling me. 100%. And yeah, you're right. It's only been 2 weeks, but yet so much has happened in the world of college football and in the world of Devy, like you say. We will start with a quick run through of all of those things, the headlines from the last 2 weeks, in case anyone isn't aware or has been totally overwhelmed by the news and headlines from college football that you've just forgotten what happened 2 weeks ago. We had Ohio State beating Penn State with a bashed up O-line, which has caused one heck of a storm regarding big noon kickoffs, but we won't dive too deep into that controversy. Come and hit us up on X if you want to chat that one through, because we'd certainly have some thoughts. We had Oregon beating Michigan fairly handily. Georgia beating Florida, but not so convincingly. South Carolina destroying Texas A&M, and we will touch on that one later, I promise, because I have some gloating to do on my early season picks right there. What stood out for you in the last 2 weeks as well, Phil? Any other games?
Oh man, Louisville and Clemson was an absolute cracker. It was everything we thought that game could be. Interestingly, obviously Miami got beat by Georgia Tech, but the week before, it's really interesting. You mentioned the Ohio State-Penn State game because while Cam Ward was absolutely pulling up trees for Miami and leading another fourth quarter comeback that week before, I was sat watching Ohio State and Penn State, and it was a bit of a snooze fest. I really picked the wrong game that afternoon. And then go on.
I was going to say you did if you wanted to watch Devy prospects. If you want to watch a patched up offensive line manhandle that lauded Penn State defensive line, it was the right game for you.
That's it, man. But then obviously Miami, Cam Ward fluffs his lines, and I won't say he struggled. That's the narrative. He struggled. Like he just couldn't keep up the heroics. Like that defense has got issues and will be their Achilles heel as the season goes on. And they're handed their first loss of the season. Ole Miss absolutely destroy and put a whooping on Georgia. Didn't think I'd be saying those words this year. Juice Wells touchdown for good measure.
I saw that one.
He must have heard everything we said about him going missing and not surviving the horror film from our Halloween show. And then, Indiana. Curtis Rourke led Indiana, the number 5 team in the country, going and beating Michigan. Like, right now, interestingly, the college football bracket would have Indiana playing Alabama. And I really don't know how I feel about that. Like, the Alabama fan in me says, well, we'll roll them. But my God, if there was a side you don't want to play at the moment, it's that Indiana team. They are so well coached and so well run. And yeah, they've got lightning in a bottle at the moment.
Yeah, Kirk Signetti is working some magic in such a short space of time. And as you well mentioned, since we've been off air, the College Football Playoff Committee have released their first and second set of rankings, which is causing a right stir in college football circles. The new 12-team playoff format makes things a little bit interesting. And for Indiana, there's all the ammunition in the world. They feel like they're being slighted. Even at number 5, they feel like they're being slighted and everybody's waiting for them to, prove it really against Ohio State in 2 weeks' time. So it's certainly in their hands. If they want to punch Ohio State in the mouth and win that game, it's gonna be hard to keep them out of that top 2.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because the 12-team playoff kind of format now, this is what we wanted. This is what we were absolutely living for. And, Colorado hold their own, fate in their own hands. Shedeur Sanders and co. Are on the brink of potentially making the playoffs. Notre Dame, again, looking strong. Yeah, and then it's anybody's game. It really, really is.
It is, and the 12-team playoffs is also doing good things for our Devy players who are maybe a little bit under the radar. So those players that wouldn't normally get some primetime coverage on college football shows or even in college football highlight packages, players, dare I say it, like Ashton Jumty would not get this kind of coverage if Boise State weren't in the running for a college football playoff spot. So I think this is helping raise the draft stock and raise the Devy profile of some of these players that we've stashed away and we've been interested in for a couple of years now. So lots of good football, lots of good football to come. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into a few of those headline stories, maybe not the ones that we've just touched on. There were plenty of amazing games, but we are going to start with a little bit of a deep dive into what is going on at USC. The USC Trojans are in a weird transition phase right now, which I don't think we all thought would be the case entering week 12 of the college football season. Lincoln Riley brought USC into the Big Ten. Let's not dance around it, with the expectation to challenge for the title. Not necessarily win, but certainly be up there in the college football playoff conversation. And they are absolutely nowhere near it. Now, to give them a little bit of a break, they've lost 5 games by 1 score or less. Well, you can't you can't lose a game by less than a score, but you know what I mean, less than a touchdown.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're a little bit of an influx on the line team. Now that's still not going to make any USC fan feel much better, but the team have made a change. Miller Moss at quarterback is out, and Jaden Mayava, the transfer from UNLV, is in. And I wanted to talk about this because this was one of, well, firstly, my picks that went wrong at the beginning of the season when I declared that Jaden Mayava would be the starting quarterback. He'd win that quarterback battle. But now I feel a little bit justified in the fact that I was higher on Mayava than Miller Moss himself. So Mayava, for those that don't know, has come from the UNLV Rebels. He led them to a historic season in his freshman season. It's a redshirt freshman in his second year of college. He got the starting job there. Led them to the most program wins they'd had since 1984, a first ever appearance in the Mountain West Championship. Mayava, in the individual accolades, was named the Mountain West Freshman of the Year, and the College Football Network declared him the Freshman Quarterback of the Year in all of college football. And from a Devy perspective, the tape suggests that he fits what Lincoln Riley wants from his quarterback a lot more than Miller Moss. He is a little bit Caleb Williams light. And obviously Caleb Williams is a phenomenal college quarterback talent. So I'm not comparing the two in terms of their abilities, but the traits and the style of play, this is why I really thought Lincoln Riley was going to start Mayava from the beginning. He's got some really good pocket maneuverability, a lovely deep ball, and he ties that up with a little bit of rushing upside. So I'm excited to see Mayava take the field. I just don't really know if it's enough to save Lincoln. And this feels ridiculous to say save Lincoln Riley's job.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting one. I think I can certainly understand the move now. I can understand the move now. But then again, I can also understand that after Miller Moss came in and led USC to the bowl game win and looked really, really good doing so at the end of last season, that he was given the opportunity to make that job his own. What I would like to kind of go back to, if you like, was just kind of draws on our conversation in the last show about the danger of Devy quarterbacks, because Caleb Williams moving to the league, Lincoln Riley's track record as a QB whisperer, and putting QBs in the league led many people as a result without a great deal of foundation other than that one tip, that one game in the bowl game, like to really overdraft Miller Moss. I saw Miller Moss go in the mid rounds of a lot of Devy drafts this year. Very much kind of without foundation, it felt, other than he was a name getting an opportunity at a big flagship program. And here we are, what are we coming into? Week 11, week 12, and all of a sudden, the change has been made. And like we've said before, these people are young men. They develop at different rates. But right now, I've not seen much from Miller Moss that says to me he's going to win that job back at any point, and that he has the makings of an NFL relevant quarterback.
No, I am totally on board. It feels a little bit. The phrase is helmet scouting, isn't it? Where we see
Absolutely.
the opportunity, but not necessarily the talent or the traits. And even those quarterbacks that have done that, they've filled in some big shoes at a big program. They've had a great year. They're usually 1 year college producers. They go to the league and we're not seeing them succeed too well. I think, Miller Moss is likely to transfer and give it one more shot in college. But I am much more excited to see what Jalen Mayava brings. And he's someone that I do have on a couple of rosters as that latest of late dart throw, because there's a bit of talent there and he's got that opportunity. And he's really, it feels like Lincoln Riley's last shot, unless he's going to bring in another transfer. But we'll worry about that going forward. We also have some interesting moves in the wide receiver room. You spoke last week about Zachariah Branch and where he's at. So we won't go over that too much. However, he did have a very good week this week against Washington. 9 targets, 6 receptions, 102 yards. So much better for Zach Branch. That will be a little bit encouraging. But the guy I want to talk about this is another victory lap that I am taking. It is the sophomore receiver, Makai Lemon. Someone who I said at the beginning of the year would take a bit of time to warm back up to his role in this offense after an injury and after really, he didn't play special teams. He played on defense for part of last season. So he really had to stamp his foot to get himself back in that wide receiver room. But the last 4 weeks, 9 targets, 8 targets, 7 targets, 9 targets. And he's turned those into 73 yards, 89 yards, 134 yards and a touchdown. And this week against Washington, 70 yards and a touchdown. So he is clearly earning a bigger target share in that wide receiver room. And dare I say, positioning himself to be the lead receiver for the Trojans in 2025.
Yeah, and to be fair, like we talk about you can do all the projection you like, and you can do all the scouting, all the film work. Sometimes guys get an opportunity and run with it, and that is exactly what Makai Lemon's done. And he looks like a really exciting prospect. I couldn't agree with you more, mate. I think that's a great shout.
Yeah, and it kind of bucks the trend that we've spoken about before. This is a 5-star wide receiver who we were quite excited for. Went in the first round, or at worst, second round of Devy drafts last season. Didn't hit any of those year one milestones that we look for, that the Campus to Canton guys have kind of trademarked as their theory for whether someone can have an impact in the NFL. But there are a couple of exceptions to that rule, and Makai Lemon could potentially be that guy. So he's on a revival streak. Let's hope that continues.
Absolutely.
And because of his role last season, we were a little bit concerned he might be entering the transfer portal. But it looks like, from my conclusions, that he will not be. He will be wrapping up a starting spot for the Trojans. But we have had some entries early into the transfer portal. I mean, the transfer portal's not open yet, but we have people who have declared that they will be entering it as soon as that window does open up. And there's been a big name from Devy circles, and that is Jonte Cook, the wide receiver who has been at Texas. How do you feel like this is going to impact him? Are you excited about this move? What does it do for his Devy value?
So this is where the transfer portal can absolutely bless us, because this is a highly recruited wide receiver, 5-star recruit, bags of talent, lovely high school film, and one that we were really, really excited for. And he has just found himself in a logjam. It seems as though his face didn't fit at Texas. I think we all thought he was going to get more of an opportunity this year, and then obviously, they take in as Isaiah Bond, who hits the ground running, and Matthew Golden has stepped up, and then also the emergence of that kind of running back room. There's an awful lot of running backs doing an awful lot of things there at the moment, and it just feels as though he's become the forgotten man. He's had 16 receptions in his time at Texas over the season and a half that he's been involved, 273 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that is just not enough of an impact for such a talented young man. So I think this is brilliant. I think this is a brilliant, brilliant move. I think there were initial reports before that Florida game that he'd been dismissed by the program and kicked off the team. And I really respected the fact that it would have been easy for Sark to ignore that. It would have been easy for Steve Sarkisian to not pay the gentleman any mind. However, he acknowledged that it was a mutual decision to benefit the young man and his future moving forward, which I think is massive for Cook in terms of not wanting to muddy his projections, and a classy move by Steve Sarkisian. Mm-hmm. What that's done then is it's put all the big boys on high alert, and I do think, like, right now, he's the number 2 ranked player in the portal, only behind the defensive lineman at Alabama, Jaheim Otis, but he's not Devy relevant, so we're not bothered. Right now, Jonte Cook is the Devy relevant player who has declared that they're going to be entering the transfer portal this offseason. So all the big fish are coming out and sniffing around and making noises. There's rumors that Georgia are interested. And you look at their wide receiver room at the moment and think that could make sense. There's no standout guy in that room. He could go there, and particularly if Carson Beck's stock continues to plummet and he decides he's going to try next season in college, then absolutely, why not? Give him an established weapon, or let him have a weapon that is capable of establishing himself, which he's not had this season. Let's be fair to him. Ole Miss sniffing around. There's a lot of noise that Ole Miss are interested. Now, you very kindly earlier on, Jack, didn't mention Ole Miss's other massive recruiting win. As early as today, or rather as late as today, Ole Miss have managed to flip the recruitment of elite 5-star high school recruit Caleb Cunningham from Alabama. And I just look at Ole Miss and think, if Juice Wells and Trey Harris obviously move on to the league this summer, there are 2 top spots at the top of that depth chart available. And if Cook can have an alpha running mate in the body style of a Caleb Cunningham, that they could be beautifully paired together. I think that would be a really exciting spot. But of course, the one that everyone's making noises about, and is perhaps because he was heavily recruited by them coming out of high school, is Oregon. Oregon are the number 1 side in the country at the moment. NIL money and Nike money for days. They're obviously Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson are likely to move on to the league. And again, there is going to be opportunity for somebody to come in and make an impact should they so wish. And having been so heavily recruited to Oregon, it doesn't surprise me that they're the early favourites. But he's going to have his pick. And, you know, again, interestingly, reading something earlier, Miami are a school that people are talking about. Now, Miami have proven that they're quite willing to go in and spend big to bring in recruits via the transfer portal. And if they want to continue to build on the massive progress they've made this year, he could just be the type of player to help them do that. So the young man's going to have his pick. I think it's a salvation for any Devy earner. And yeah, you know, second chance City, which is what the portal should be.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's suffered from the portal, so he should therefore be given the opportunity to benefit from the portal. I think that wide receiver room got so crowded at Texas. I mean, Silas Bolden transferred in, and I don't know what he's doing. I don't really know if he's making the field or not. So I'm glad Jonte Cook's getting out of there. Not because it's a bad program, not at all. Not because it's a bad coaching setup to develop wide receivers, not at all. But just because he has been kind of shoehorned into a much smaller role than his talent deserves. I think Ole Miss could be really interesting, especially if Jackson Dart comes back for another year. Oregon will be really interesting to see who the quarterback is there. Is it going to be Dante Moore, assuming Dylan Gabriel moves on? It'll be fascinating to see what happens. And you mentioned Miami. Miami have shown that they can develop a wide receiver as well in Xavier Restrepo this season. That's going to give them a little bit of kudos for players that are interested in entering the portal, which, let's be honest, Miami have not had for a good few years now. They've not had that shiny, quarterback and wide receiver that they can send to the league. So lots of good options for Jonte Cook. I really hope he makes the right decision that allows him to display the real talent that he has. And I definitely feel like that because I have hyped him up on this show and I have purchased him all over the place in Devy leagues.
Yeah. Is there anybody else? Sorry, Jack. Is there anybody else that you think might be next? Any names that you've kind of got your eye on as people who should, or people who have been bandied around to potentially enter the portal that you don't think should? Who are the names?
Yeah, interesting. So just before we started recording, the Boston College quarterback Thomas Castellanos has entered the transfer portal. I think that is a really interesting sleeper quarterback as a Devy prospect. He is so much fun to watch. He is a proper dual threat quarterback, but also a gunslinger, if that makes sense. He will throw that ball again and again, but he has really elusive footwork and he's good on the ground. So that's the only quarterback that I really feel of note that has entered the transfer portal, or at least that has come across my radar so far. It's really the wide receivers that I've been thinking about. And it's because the Campus to Canton guys put out a tweet this week listing some players that they think should enter the transfer portal. And it's headlined by Zach Branch, who we've spoken about. If he's going to lose, it's not that he's going to lose the wide receiver one spot, it's that he hasn't been given or he hasn't earned the wide receiver one spot in that Lincoln Riley offense. So we know he's talented enough to demand that kind of role somewhere else. So I'd like to see Zach Branch enter the transfer portal in the same way that Jonte Cook has, just to elevate and develop his skill set, but it has to be to the right landing spot. I think it's not an at any cost transfer portal guy for Zach Branch. Other players who are, I know you are high on Alec Ayamanor, and I apologize if I butchered that name, who's at Stanford, someone who's got the talent, but not the platform to show it, arguably. And I don't know how many years he has played in college, actually.
He is a redshirt sophomore. So technically he is draft eligible this year. And you're dead right. Like, this Stanford Cardinals team is poor this year, really poor, and his usage within that offense has changed. I don't think they're playing to his strengths, and I think his move will be dependent on whether or not he still is hearing that he'll receive top 100 draft capital this year. I think if he, if he's going to get that nod for top 100 draft capital, I think he'll go to the league. Otherwise, if he slips as a result of that, and he starts to hear as a day 3 prospect, I think he'll look to test the portal and make a run of it somewhere else.
Cool. I think he needs the platform, like you say. He needs the quarterback that isn't a Stanford quarterback. He needs arguably the TV time. Other players, Devontae Ross at Troy is on this list from campus to Canton. He's someone who does not have the platform necessarily to be on everybody's eyeballs, but he is absolutely bossing it this season. He is the Troy offense, and Troy are doing pretty decently. So he's someone that I feel like could make the step up to a Power 4/Power 5, whatever's going on with the Pac-12 next season. You've got Deuce Robinson on this list, another wide receiver at USC, someone we've just not seen enough of. The Clemson wide receiver room is a really interesting one too, because they have a lot of players that can play in the slot. And I'm assuming that Antonio Williams is going to go to the NFL draft this season, because he is actually having a really good season, that revival that we needed to see. But he's their main outside receiver. Apart from that, you've got Adam Randall, who can play in the slot, TJ Moore. You've got some good recruits coming in at Clemson. So I'm really interested, especially Adam Randall, to see what he does. Other names to throw in here, Brandon Inniss, although he started to establish himself. Really interesting
one. We were just talking about that off air before we joined, before we started recording. And he obviously is another who didn't meet the year 1-0 metrics, which presents his opportunity to make it to the league as significantly worrying. And in fact, had gone from being a kind of first or second round Devy pick as an incoming recruit to not even drafted in some startups last year. He was so far off the radar, but we're just starting to see a smattering of him, in that Ohio State offense. He was a high recruit, and I suppose it just depends on where he sees his future at Ohio State.
Yeah, I think we were, as you say, we were chatting before the show started, and Ohio State missing out on Jamie French, the 5-star high school recruit that's committed to Texas, means that Ohio State room is not bringing in the top end caliber wide receiver in the next recruiting class. Now, Ohio State have a track record of identifying really talented wide receivers, regardless of their star ranking. So that's not to say that it's going to be a dud class. But if Emeka Egbuka goes to the NFL, which I feel is inevitable, you've got Carnell Tate looking to establish himself in that offense. You've got Jeremiah Smith, who already has established himself as an alpha outside receiver. I think Brandon Inniss, if he continues this trajectory, he's got a role to play at Ohio State. Now, he's not going to be the number one receiver there. So I think that's the decision that he's got to make. Is he going to go for a fresh start at a different program where he has the chance to be the number one receiver? Or is he going to stick it out at a renowned wide receiver developing university and play the 3 role?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It is an interesting one.
But Terry McLaurin played that role, and look how successful he's been in the NFL. So
absolutely,
there we are. And the last one I definitely want to throw in there is Jurion Dickey, the wide receiver at Oregon. We're not seeing anything of him. He had that famed game where seven players caught a touchdown. and 11 players caught a pass, and Jerion Dickey was not one of them. That is a damning statistic, and he just doesn't have a future at Oregon, in my opinion. Devy-wise, oh, God.
Can you imagine what that does for him? Can you imagine what that does, particularly when we mentioned earlier that one of the leading names out there for Jonte Cook is Oregon? Like, what does that say about what they think of Jerion Dickey?
Yeah, it doesn't say a lot, does it? And Dylan Gabriel threw all of those passes. It wasn't a backup in at that point, so he's clearly not trusted. He's not a big enough piece of even the backup offense in terms of the wide receiver rotation. So cut and run for him, I think, from Oregon, and it's a tough road for him to recoup some of that Devy value, but hopefully he does something about it, and we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, Phil, I've left it long enough. I've held you back long enough. We cannot do today's Devy episode without talking about Jalen freaking Milroe and his performance against LSU. The floor is yours.
So everyone, just take it back a month to the Georgia game, and everybody was talking about Jalen Milroe as the potential number one pick in the draft, and how he was the lights out front runner for any kind of QB recognition based on that performance and how well they played against the Bulldogs. And then we've gone through that murky patch where results haven't been great, performances haven't been there. And I think the popular buzz now, if you look at the most recent mock drafts and the way people are talking, is that it's quite favourable and sexy now to say that there's only going to be 2 first-round quarterbacks drafted. And people are talking about Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Now, Jalen Milroe has done nothing this weekend other than firmly remind people that he is a potential game changer at the next level, and that he should be considered serious and be treated seriously in this conversation still. Listen, people are going to talk about the whopping 185 yards on the ground and the ridiculous 4 touchdowns. And that 72-yard run for the 4th touchdown was absolutely blazing. If you'd have seen Ashton Ginty make that run, we'd have been absolutely raving about it. Yet it was a quarterback, and so we just assume it, we're not talking about it in the same light. It was phenomenal. The breakaway long speed was just unbelievable. But I digress. The thing I want to talk about is he still went 12 of 18, so 67%, 2/3 completions. So 12 of 18. Yes, it was only for 109 yards, okay, but turnover free. He was safe when he did look to pass, but once the game script dictated that once they unlocked the fact that they weren't able to handle the rush, well, he showed you how special he could be. And those runs were dynamic, they were fast, they were powerful, they were strong. They were an absolute joy to behold. And this is where, look at floor for fantasy. Let's forget about the NFL draft at the moment. Let's look at floor for fantasy. Right? He now has 16 rushing touchdowns this season. Okay, and he has he's just shy of 600 yards. That's a clip of about 60 yards per game. 60 yards per game puts him right up there at the moment in Lamar Jackson rushing numbers territory, if that translates to the next level. It puts him up there with Jaden Daniels in terms of rushing. And I'm not saying for a moment he's the same type of prospect, but we're talking about the floor that gives you. We're talking about the fact that although he's had some struggles as an NFL quarterback, Jalen Hurts, with his touchdown production on the ground, he's keeping himself as a kind of top 5 performing fantasy QB. That is the upside Jalen Milroe's got. And unless unless the draft stock absolutely plummets, which I don't think it will, because somebody is going to fall in love with that skill set. Christ, Anthony Richardson's got his job back today, at least for this weekend. People realizing that this is a skill set that, if developed properly, can win. And I've said it before. The Anthony Richardson experiment has been a real roller coaster. But Jalen Milroe has got 2 full years as a starter. He is so much further down the line than probably where Anthony Richardson is now. And I think if you're going to take a gamble, why not take a gamble on this kid? Why not? I mean, sides that in coming into the is there anybody that stands out to you as a potential second half of the NFL draft team that realistically could gamble on a quarterback? You could sit him a year behind Geno for me in Seattle.
Oh, you could. You'd make George very happy.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine him coming in after a year and taking that offense with a DK Metcalf, a JSN, all right, 2 really, really good running backs in Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet? That would be beautiful. That would be absolutely beautiful. And a head coach who has been in a building where Lamar Jackson was. It's all there. It's all there for the guy. And, I just look at his potential, and I still can't get on board and say he's the QB1. I think that'd be stupid. And I've said that all along. There are concerns. There are things that need developing. But the physical attributes are so strong that someone's going to take a chance. There's talk again. There's been talk after the Tennessee game that actually maybe he'll come back for another year. Maybe NIL will convince him to come back. I just don't see it. I don't think. I think right now, when other people's stock is dropping, he's holding strong and potentially even reminding us that he's a riser in this process. And I think supply and demand will dictate that he goes this year.
Yeah, I think that you've hit the nail on the head there with the supply and demand. In the NFL, you need a quarterback to win. We're seeing that because you can't patch together a quarterback room of like Gardner Minshew and Aidan O'Connell. Sorry, the name escaped me. At the Raiders,
this year, this week.
This week, it's a mess. You can't patch it up with journeyman quarterbacks, and I think the NFL know that. I think the NFL are willing to take that gamble and push the chips in on quarterbacks, whether they have to then pick which style of quarterback they want to go for. But the comparisons and the tape from this weekend, like you say, will only have boosted Jalen Milroe's Devy stock and NFL stock. I think after this weekend, he's gone. I think he is going in the first round of the NFL draft. I couldn't tell you where. I'm not going to pretend to be in the pockets of NFL scout analysts, but he is. It was just so much fun to watch, especially for you, I'm sure, and especially on the primetime stage at LSU in Baton Rouge, and absolutely wiping the floor with them. Yeah. And the other thing was it wasn't just one type of run. It wasn't all designed runs. It wasn't all RPOs that he pulled. It wasn't all reading the outside defensive lineman and either pulling it or handing it to his running back. He really mixed it up. He really showed intelligence with his running. That's what I was really impressed with.
I just feel like it's a game changer. It's an absolute game changer because, remove the 72-yarder. What those runs did a lot of the time was just reset the chains and give your team the chance to fight another day. Take what's there and reset the downs. And if you can do that, you're going to wear teams out. Now, you would love to potentially have seen a little bit more balance. There aren't going to be many games where your leading receiver logs less than 50 yards. But the game script dictated, and the way the scoreline went, it was like a knife through butter. So you keep going. But the big thing for me when you watch that game was Garrett Nussmeier on the other side showed a relative, you saw his inexperience shining through and really hammer home the reason why I believe he needs to go back to LSU and play another year's football at least. Because he didn't look after the ball. And I think what pleased me most was Jalen Milroe. Although the passing numbers weren't lofty, he never put the ball in danger either. And that is something you need to see from him to be sure of his draft stock at the next level.
Yeah, and he's going to be tested. So I think he's got the opportunity in this end of the season running, and then in your mind, hopefully the playoffs. Jalen Milroe is going to have the chance, because those caliber teams in the back end of this schedule. I mean, is it Wooford aside that you've got on the billing? Probably not too testing there.
And I mean, there's Mercer as well this weekend. So
oh goodness, the SEC soft schedules. Sorry, what? But he is going to be challenged, because if they make the playoffs, teams are going to try and take away his legs, and they're going to have time to plan for that. But that means that Alabama, Kalen DeBoer, Jalen Milroe have time to plan their form of attack. So I think it'd be really exciting, really interesting to see Alabama in the playoffs. I think that offense will be really fun. I'm going to rush through this, but I really don't want to rush through this, because another rushing style quarterback who has put on an absolute show in the past 2 weeks is LaNorris Sellers, the South Carolina quarterback who we previewed in the off season as, I mean, he's an absolute darling in my eyes. I love LaNorris Sellers. I love his style of play, his physicality, and sure, the passing needs some refinement. His protection of the ball in both the running game and the passing game needs some work. But he is in his first year starting as a quarterback, and he has time. The last 2 weeks, he led South Carolina to at the time, huge upset against what was the number 10 ranked Texas A&M Aggies. They were leading the SEC title race at the time. And Sellers he completed 13 passes of 27 attempts. So not an ideal statistic there, but he did rack up 244 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, as well as 15 rushes, 106 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. And there is a highlight tape where LaNorris Sellers absolutely trucks a linebacker. He absolutely did. It was third down. He needed an extra 2 yards. The defender met him before the line of scrimmage, and Sellers absolutely destroyed him, lowered the shoulder, just muscled his way over that first down yardage line. It was so impressive.
For anybody who hasn't seen it, Jack, if you'll filibuster and keep talking about LaNorris Sellers, I will dig into my archive, because I know I posted it on our X feed. I will dig into my archive and I will repost it whilst you keep filibustering and talking lovely about LaNorris Sellers.
Excellent work. Thank you, Phil. And then the week just gone against Vanderbilt, a plucky, exciting Vanderbilt team. In fact, this was quite a fun game to watch between South Carolina and Vandy. He completed a much more impressive 14 of 20 passes for 238 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 13 rushes for just 38 yards and 2 fumbles. So we saw a little bit of the negative side of LaNorris Sellers. He really does need to refine his one of those fumbles was on a handoff, I believe. So just refining when he pulls the ball out and the technique there with the running back, who was Rocket Sanders, and protect that ball when he's running. But boy, the future is really bright for LaNorris Sellers. And I've heard comparisons to Anthony Richardson. And this really ties into what we've been saying the last few weeks. I mean, we've been saying it all season, but especially the last few weeks. And Phil, I know you put a tweet out there about this. The time and reps in an offense are super important at the quarterback position. Our 1 year flash in the pan quarterbacks, we're seeing them struggle in the NFL. Trey Lance, Anthony Richardson, they don't have the backlog, the catalog of carries, the catalog of passes, the catalog of reading an offense. But Lenora Sellers has the time to do that. He has plenty of time. He is going to be the center point of this South Carolina offense going forward. I just think it's a really, really exciting time to be a South Carolina fan, to be a Devy fan with Lenora Sellers on your roster. I'm going all out. I would love to have 100% roster coverage of Lenora Sellers. Maybe that's my task for the week. See if I can pick him up here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the starting foundations, like you've got the time to mold this guy into whatever he wants to be. Now, the best thing that could happen for me is that he strikes up a rapport and a relationship with Nick Harbour, and that they propel each other and carry each other forward. But I think I'm clutching at straws there.
We'll see. Nick Harbour's on his own little arc of development, but it's not one that's heading for the sky right this second. Right, Phil. Let's get into the meat of the show today. We are wanting to have a look at what it means to rebuild in a Devy league. And we hope this will be really useful, practical advice for people who are in their Devy leagues right now and thinking about what direction they go in. So talk to me a little bit about what is your idea of your threshold for deciding to push that rebuild button?
Yeah, so kind of similar in a sense to a regular dynasty rebuild. I think you've got to look at my mantra is simple. There's no point in sitting in the middle. Like, you either want to be deep in a rebuild and putting together a new roster, or you want to be contending. And if you are stuck between a rock and a hard place, then all you're doing is you're paying your league dues every year and giving somebody else money. And that isn't fun. Like, the fun is in the build, and the fun is then in winning. So for me, I'm looking, if I'm sat at the kind of, if I'm out of playoff contention already, if I'm in the lower half of my league bracket now at the end of NFL Week 10, I'm looking and I'm saying, right, am I already in a rebuild, which is potential? If not, if I've not made that call, I'm looking now and going, right, where is my roster? And I'm having honest evaluations about, have I been bitten by the injury bug? Have I gambled on a QB who has been dropped or is going through their own kind of things, but actually my team's not that far away. I just need that bit more luck. But if I'm looking at it and I'm seeing aging assets, depreciating assets, all my own picks because I've been a little bit frugal, now's the time to say, let's have some fun and let's start rebuilding. And in a similar way to like you would in dynasty leagues, I think there's different ways to go about it, and we just wanted to kind of give people the opportunity to maybe reflect on their own rosters, reflect on what they've got in their Devy pipeline, and then the most effective way of building from there.
Yeah, I think so. Your typical rebuilding strategy in Dynasty, in Devy, is going to be selling aging, productive running backs and quarterback pieces in order to acquire wide receivers, because their value is insulated a little bit better than running backs, and obviously draft picks. So in your dynasty leagues, you're looking to pick up as many draft picks as possible. If you can get your hands on those first rounders for next season, then you're sitting pretty, and your rebuild can start really quickly, which is also the dream, isn't it? You don't want a 5-year rebuild, really.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and so like you're right. That first and foremost, looking to acquire capital from aging, still productive players, and get out before that everyone realizes the decline setting in. What type of players would you target then?
The kind of NFL players that I want to acquire, particularly this week, is someone like Chris Olave, who's gone on injured reserve. He's been playing in a lackluster offense, to put it nicely, and therefore he's had a bit of a down season even before the injury, but he's still got that top end talent as a wide receiver. But if he's on a contender, they've got no use for him this season. So someone like Chris Olave, someone like Rashee Rice, who also is on IR. Some of those top end wide receivers who are injured would be who I'm looking to acquire. The easy answer is all the rookie wide receivers who are popping off, like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. But I think you're going to have a much harder time prying those away from any other teams. But yeah, I'm looking for those wide receivers who are maybe in a down year. Oh, T. Higgins, someone who is going into a contract year. He's going to be in a fresh environment next year. Again, his value, it probably spiked a little bit when he signed the franchise tag to play this season. But how many weeks has he missed?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, because he's on nearly all of my dynasty rosters. He's missed the last 4 weeks and 5 of the last 6, I believe. So his value is down. His owner is frustrated, especially if they are on the verge of the playoffs or sitting in that 4-5 seed spot. He's no use to them right now. So can you go and get him before he sees the field again by selling players like Tyreek Hill, who's still sat on your roster as an elite player, but actually not been that great this season? Say it quietly. Not had the best fantasy season. Now to a situation getting a bit clearer. So maybe it's wheels up for Tyreek Hill, but someone like him, can you get rid of Devontae Adams off your roster while he still has some value now that he's been traded to the Jets? Those are the kind of wide receiver moves I'm looking to make. I'm actually considering, I have a league where I have Tyreek Hill and Josh Jacobs in a Devy league, and I am nowhere near the playoffs. So I'm weighing up what to do with those two players. And my tendency, my instinct is to try and trade them away. It would leave me very, very thin at running back. But then how long is Josh Jacobs going to be a running back one for in the NFL? And if I keep him, I'm not as thin, but I'm not as talented.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's interesting because let's talk kind of more general strategy then, because I think there's 2 ways that I'd look to go about this. First of all, obviously, we understand that the more swings at a bat you have in Devy, the increased chance of success. I mean, that's simple law of averages, and so the easy thing to try and do is to try and get to try and trade away a veteran for Devy picks, in addition to a piece, because you want to make sure that you still have an NFL roster. So I aren't as worried, unless the value dictates it. I aren't worried about making sure in my rebuild that I am getting a first round pick in every deal that I do, because people don't want to part with them either, right? I'm interested in 2nd and 3rd round picks that people will throw on top to get a deal done. They're the picks that I want. I want second and third round Devy picks in abundance. And because, look, we've said it before. The problem is everybody also wants Tet McMillan. Everybody also wants Ashton Ginty. And those elite players. So nobody's going to sell you those either. So if you're rebuilding, trying to think that you're just going to make a team of those stars that are on the way in is foolish. It's not going to happen. What you want to do is you want to take those second and third round Devy picks that you can acquire as throw-ins in deals. And you want to swing the bat on lots of guys that are looking at the incoming draft class, the incoming NFL draft class. So you want to be taking a flyer on, this year it would have been a Trey Harris, a Juice Wells, the plethora of running backs we knew were coming in that were still untaken. I want guys that are coming in the next draft class to give my roster an immediate boost. Okay, because what will happen then on the flip side of that is a year down the line, on the eve of the NFL draft, we all know that in our regular dynasty leagues, on the eve of the NFL draft is the best time to sell your rookie picks. You know that if you have a second round rookie pick, you can get a much better established veteran for that value because people are going gooey for rookies, right? It's the same idea in Devy. And it might be a little bit asked about face from the way people normally think about it. But if you've stocked up on guys that are coming into that next draft class, you can spearhead that rebuild by selling them on the eve of the NFL draft. So, for example, it might well be that this year you have a Trey Harris, an Isaiah Bond, and you might be looking at, and respectfully to Isaiah Bond, I think Isaiah Bond is going to be just fine at the next level. I do. But I can't perceive him being a top 12 wide receiver. I just can't see that. But if he gets first round draft capital, people are going to pay a premium for him to get him on their roster. I would sell him for 2 or 3 vet pieces that bolster my lineup. They're not going to be the home run hitters and those home run names, but they're going to give your side a much more solid floor that you're probably lacking at the moment. And so actually selling some of those players, drafting them a year early, biding your time and selling on the eve of the draft is a great way because people stop valuing vets. You'll get some great deals. You will get some. Imagine getting Joe Mixon this year. Imagine Joe Mixon was been thrown away, absolutely widely discarded. Now, if you could have got Joe Mixon for, insert round 2, day 2 wide receiver, that's great business. Joe Mixon wins you a league this year, and we're about winning. And again, I sometimes feel like as Devy players, we get so blinkered because we enjoy scouting these college guys. It's the bit of the game we absolutely love, and we all fancy ourselves as armchair GMs. But the hooks and the crooks of this game is about winning. And I have never in my years of playing seen a Devy team or a dynasty team win completely full of youth. There needs to be a veteran presence that allows for that developmental curve when some of these rookies land. And, the best way to get that and get them in spades is at those times in the year when people don't value them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the peaks and troughs of value, isn't it? Which is the same in Dynasty, but it works so differently in Devy because of when the college season is and when the draft is. And I love that comparison with Joe Mixon because compare how he is performing this season to Xavier Worthy and how hyped Xavier Worthy was going into the draft, obviously when he was drafted by the Chiefs in the first round. And yet he's not helping your dynasty roster right now. He's not helping you win a championship right now. Now, that doesn't mean he won't in the future, but right now he is not. And so the value peak was selling him when he was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in the first round. And that is the investment you put into the player. You've cultivated and scouted that player at their lower value. And you have then, it's difficult, like you say, we get tied to these players. you got to know when to tap out and feel okay about it.
That's it. So I mean, just imagine for a moment, like say you did that deal, say you picked up Mixon and a Devy second, and you sold Xavier Worthy, and with that second in the Devy draft, you then took Trey Harris. You can keep that ball rolling and keep rebuilding, like re-roll the dice with that extra pick, and you're acquiring an asset who's a league winner this year. It just feels to me, like I said, it's backwards to why we fall in love with Devy, but it also wins fantasy championships. And yeah, like I said, we in that blissful utopian world, we would have an incoming class every year with guys that we want to keep on our roster, guys that we know are going to be those really, really highly ranked guys. But it doesn't happen. You're lucky if you get two. Heck, some years you're lucky if you get one make your roster. So until then, it's how do you build that side around it? And we said in our very first show, all the way back in January, Devy is dynasty, just with that added wrinkle. And again, I like the idea. There are some fantastic resources out there now, ourselves included, if I'm going to toot our own horn, who are showing you these players and showing you what they're capable of, and really bigging them up, and rightly so. Take advantage of it. If you know that a league mate has fallen in love with a particular running back, and that running back is on your Devy squad, you will be able to get a premium. And the reason that works in Devy is you're not buying a rookie pick. You're not buying the gamble. You're not trading the dream of a rookie pick. And that owner, say you sell the 104, and that owner has his eye on said quarterback. And he's nervous because it could go. That dream could be ruined at 101, 102, 103. And all the time, that owner's getting more and more nervous. In Devy, if you know that the owner likes that player and you have that player, there's no added gamble there. You can sell that player to that owner directly for whatever fee they're daft enough to pay. It just removes that element of gamble of having to worry about what the rest of the league's doing as well. You can be very specific in who you target, and you can really drive home those deals that you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good idea, like you say, to keep tabs on your league mates and who they support, what they're watching, what podcasts they're listening to, what players they are investing in, and you can get those deals done. And it feels a little more personally crafted. Do you know what I mean? When a trade is done in that way, which is good. The other strategy, or the other point that I wanted to talk about, is how I guess Devy strategy differs to Dynasty strategy, because the picks that we're trading for are less valuable than rookie picks. Now, that is that's for one of two reasons. Either it's because you're picking from a depleted talent pool. You've picked up a rookie pick in your trades, and therefore you're picking the best of the rest. Now, for this year, that could have landed you Jaden Daniels. So sometimes you do strike absolute gold, but that is not likely to be the case year after year. So rookie picks are less valuable, and then Devy picks are also less valuable because they are more volatile. If you are picking up a first round Devy pick in exchange for an NFL piece, you are likely taking a freshman or a surprise breakout player, so likely a sophomore, who is still anywhere between 2 and 4 years away from the NFL, and they still have to navigate that murky path of NIL money, the transfer portal, coach hiring and firings, and a high injury rate. It's a physical sport. You can be the best player on your team and you can get a gruesome injury. So I went and looked at I have 3 traditional Devy leagues that I'm playing in. Standard Devy leagues. We won't go into the twists and turns of the other ones for now. Only 5 first-round picks this year were for established Devy prospects because they're just not available. So that is 13.8%. And when I say established players, the bar's not that high because I include Nick Anderson, the Oklahoma receiver, in there. Jalen Royals, the Utah State wide receiver. So it's a group of 5. It's a big gamble. So established Devy is probably pushing the line. It does include Jalen Milroe. It includes Carson Beck and Isaiah Bond. And so I would argue that Isaiah Bond is the exception there. The rest of them are dart throws because either it's a dart throw on the player or their talent, like Anderson or Royals, because we don't really know how good they are, or it's because of their positional translation to the NFL, which basically means they're a quarterback to me, and that translation to the NFL is not guaranteed. So it is trickier to recoup value on NFL prospects if you are picking up picks, if you're trading for picks, sorry.
Yeah.
It's a high risk, high reward strategy to go all in for Devy players and picks. You are pushing your rebuild down the line because everybody likes to think that they can rebuild their Devy roster through the Devy draft.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the hit rate shows us that that is not true. And it's certainly not true that everyone can rebuild their roster through the Devy draft because there aren't enough top end players for every team in your league to do so. So I would say you need to insulate your trades when you are rebuilding. Absolutely go into rebuild mode, but insulate your trades by picking up wide receivers because they hold that value a little bit longer, getting an NFL piece. And like you said swing your bat, get as many of those second and third round picks as you can. I think that's probably the best bit of advice we're giving from this section, is that you don't need to go after that first round pick every time. You don't need to give up Tyreek Hill for 2 first round Devy picks.
Yep.
You want to get as many swings of the bat in the second and third round and insulate yourself from absolutely tanking that trade by having an NFL piece, because you could pick up 2 absolute duds with your first round Devy picks.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
And then,
when none of us are that good at picking in Devy.
I think my final thing that I'd add on that, and I agree with everything you've said, is look for opportunities to you've if you're playing Devy, you've already scouted the tape. You might not have the player, but you've scouted the tape. There might be players you like on other rosters. If their initial breakout doesn't come, target year two players. So, for example, a swing and a miss a hit and a miss, in the same draft. This year, I've done deals in a Devy league where I've made trades that saw me acquire both Cedric Tillman, who I loved pre-draft, and Jalen Hyatt. I acquired them both in the off-season. Both were throw-ins on deals that were dirt cheap. I enjoyed the tape on both. I thought Hyatt had more of a potential situation in New York, but I loved Cedric Tillman. I'm an absolute Cedric Tillman stan and have been since way before it was cool. So I acquired them both in deals this offseason as throw-ins because they were basically free. They'd graduated from people's Devy rosters onto their taxi squads and their dynasty rosters. Year one didn't do much. And now Cedric Tillman is, Jamar Chase aside, the kind of wide receiver one over the last 3 weeks in fantasy. Is it going to happen every time? No, but you've done the homework. If you can get one of those guys that you liked as a throw-in who's maybe not hit it up yet, don't discard them straight away.
Absolutely. Right, we are running over, Phil. So let us hit you with some games to watch in weeks 12 and 13 before we hit rivalry week. which is exciting in week 14. So in week 12, we have got Texas, Arkansas. Who am I? Texas playing Arkansas. Colorado host Utah in a really interesting game for playoff connotations. Arizona State are playing Kansas State. Now, this is a game I want to highlight because Sam Levitt is the quarterback at Arizona State, and he is having a pretty good breakout season. And you'll see Arizona State feature in week 13's previews too. But to round off week 12, we've got Tennessee and Georgia. Ooh, yes.
Big game.
A little bit of that. Right, tell us about week 13, Phil, and we will sign off.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got Indiana at Ohio State. You already mentioned that one earlier. Vandy and LSU. Everyone's favorite second team this year, Vanderbilt, going to LSU. Can they heap more misery on those Bengal Tigers? BYU and Arizona State. And then finally, to round it out, Army and Notre Dame. So there are still so many big games coming up and plenty to get excited about.
Absolutely. And we will be back with loads more content in a couple of weeks' time. In the meantime, make sure you are following us on X at Wildcard Devy, and make sure you follow and subscribe to the Fantasy Wildcard team on YouTube, and find the Fantasy Wildcard team on X as well at Fantasy Wildcard. There's so much good content coming out from all teams on pretty much every day of the week. You will not be disappointed. Phil, catch you soon. Listeners, see you later.